"Congratulations, you have a beautiful baby girl." Grace's voice was calm and sweet, but deep inside, her mind was already working. "This baby doesn't belong to you," she thought. "Your joy won't last long." For years, Nurse Grace had been working in St. Mary's Hospital, a hospital known for its excellent maternity care. Every new mother trusted her. Every doctor praised her for her dedication. But behind her kind smile was a woman filled with bitterness and hatred. Grace was not always this. Grace grew up in a poor neighborhood. Her mother was a seamstress, and her father was a fisherman who barely made enough to feed the family. Life was hard, but they were happy, at least for a while. When Grace was 12, tragedy struck. Her father died in a boat accident. After that, everything changed. Her mother struggled to make ends meet, and Grace had to grow up fast. She started doing odd jobs to support her family. Despite the hardship, Grace was a bright student. She dreamed of becoming a nurse, hoping to escape the poverty that had plagued her family. She worked hard, earned a scholarship, and went to nursing school. It seemed like life was finally turning around for her. But fate had other plans. Grace met Daniel in her final year of nursing school. He was charming, handsome, and seemed to truly love her. They made plans for a future together. Grace believed she had found happiness at last. But just a few weeks before their wedding, Daniel disappeared. Grace waited for him, hoping he would return, but he never did. She later found out that he had left her for another woman, a wealthy woman. Her heart shattered. From that day, something inside Grace changed. She became cold, angry, and resentful. She told herself she didn't need anyone. After finishing nursing school, Grace got a job at St. Mary's Hospital. At first, she worked hard and took care of her patients with genuine care. But every time she saw happy couples with their babies, her heart burned with envy. "Why do they get to be happy when my life was ruined?" she thought. One day, a woman named Ngozi gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. Ngozi and her husband were overjoyed. They had waited for 5 years to have a child. Watching their happiness, Grace felt the familiar sting of bitterness. "I'll teach them that life isn't always perfect," she decided. That night, she swapped Ngozi's baby with another one from the ward, a weak baby born prematurely. Ngozi never suspected a thing. A few months later, the baby got sick. Grace gave Ngozi the wrong medication, making the baby even worse. Ngozi and her husband were heartbroken, but Grace felt no remorse. "This is just the beginning," she whispered to herself. Over the next 10 years, Grace perfected her dark art. She became an expert at swapping babies without anyone noticing. Her strategies were simple but effective. Study the couples. Grace only targeted happy, wealthy, or beautiful couples, the kind of couples she envied the most. Swap at night. Most of the swaps happened during the quiet night shifts when fewer staff were around. Fake medical issues. Grace would convince the parents that their baby had a rare illness and prescribe medications that made things worse. No one ever suspected her. The hospital staff saw her as the kind, caring nurse who was always willing to help. "Poor Grace," they said. "She's so hardworking but so lonely." Little did they know the truth. One morning, Chioma and Uche walked into the hospital. Chioma was heavily pregnant, and the couple looked excited about their first child. Grace watched them closely, her eyes narrowing. Another perfect couple, she thought. Chioma gave birth to a healthy baby girl later that evening. Grace smiled sweetly as she handed the baby to Chioma. "She's beautiful," Chioma said, her face glowing with joy. Grace nodded, but her mind was already planning. That night, she swapped Chioma's baby with a sickly one from another ward. The next day, when Chioma noticed the baby was struggling to feed, Grace reassured her. "It's nothing serious," she said. "Just give her these medications, and she'll be fine." Chioma trusted Grace. After all, why wouldn't she? Grace was the senior nurse, the one who had helped so many mothers before her. Grace's dark game continued for years. She became a master manipulator, weaving her web of lies so perfectly that no one ever questioned her. The hospital staff admired her dedication. New mothers trusted her completely. But in reality, Grace had become a ticking time bomb, a woman driven by envy and bitterness. Her swaps were not random. Each one was carefully planned. She always chose couples that seemed too happy, too perfect, people who reminded her of everything she had lost. "If I can't be happy, neither can they," she often told herself. One of Grace's early targets was Ngozi and Ifeanyi, a couple who had just welcomed their second child, a healthy baby boy. They were the kind of couple that Grace hated the most. Young, successful, and deeply in love. The moment Grace saw them, she knew what she had to do. This would be easy, she thought. She swapped their healthy baby with a baby from the neonatal intensive care unit, NICU, a baby born with a rare heart defect. For the next few weeks, she played her role perfectly. She pretended to care, offering comfort and support whenever Ngozi expressed concern about the baby's health. "It's just a minor issue," Grace said one day, handing Ngozi a bottle of medication. "He'll grow out of it." But instead of getting better, the baby's condition worsened. Ngozi and Ifeanyi were heartbroken, blaming themselves for their child's suffering. Meanwhile, Grace watched from the shadows, her face calm but her heart filled with satisfaction. Grace's manipulations didn't stop with baby swaps. She also became an expert at giving false diagnoses and deadly advice. She convinced one mother that her baby was allergic to breast milk, causing the baby to lose weight rapidly. She told another couple that their child had a rare genetic disorder, prescribing expensive medications that the baby didn't need. Every time a family fell apart, Grace felt a twisted sense of victory. Then came Ton and Kemi, a power couple in their early 30s. Ton was a rising star in the tech industry, and Kemi was a successful lawyer. They were the kind of couple that made headlines, a perfect family in the public eye. When Kemi gave birth to a baby boy, Grace knew she had found her next target. "They have everything," she thought. "Let's see how long it lasts." She swapped their healthy baby with a newborn who had serious health complications. The baby cried constantly, couldn't sleep, and refused to eat. Ton and Kemi were overwhelmed. "Is this normal?" Kemi asked Grace one night, tears streaming down her face. "It's just colic," Grace lied. "It happens to some babies. Don't worry." But things only got worse. Grace prescribed a medication that caused severe side effects, leaving the baby even more fragile. Ton and Kemi began to argue constantly. The stress of caring for a sick baby strained their once perfect marriage. Grace had always been careful, but even the best laid plans have cracks. One day, a junior nurse named Amoka noticed something strange in the hospital records. 2 babies born on the same night had their blood types recorded incorrectly. Amoka brought it to Grace's attention. "There must be a mistake," she said, showing Grace the files. Grace's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly regained her composure. "Oh, that's just a clerical error," she said, smiling sweetly. "I'll take care of it." Amoka nodded, trusting her senior. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Meanwhile, Chioma and Uche, one of Grace's earlier targets, returned to the hospital for a follow-up. Their baby had been sick for months, and no treatment seemed to work. Desperate for answers, they decided to run a DNA test. The results were shocking. The baby was not theirs. "This can't be true," Uche said, his voice trembling. "Are you saying my wife cheated on me?" Chioma burst into tears. "I've never cheated." This must be a mistake. They confronted the hospital, demanding answers. Grace watched from a distance, her heart pounding. It's only a matter of time before they trace this back to me, she thought. Grace knew she was walking on thin ice after the DNA test debate with Chioma and Uche, but she refused to panic. I've done this for years without being caught, she reassured herself. I just need to be smarter. She decided to go back to what she did best, divide and conquer. If she could keep the families busy fighting among themselves, no one would have the time to investigate her. Grace invited Chioma for a private conversation. I believe you, she said with a kind smile. I know you love your husband and would never cheat. But, sometimes labs make mistakes with DNA results. Maybe it's worth doing the test again. Chioma nodded, feeling a sliver of hope. Yes, maybe it was just a mistake, she said. But Grace wasn't done. She pulled Uche aside later that day. You're a good man, she said. But you know how stressful pregnancy can be. Some women get tempted. Uche's face hardened. Are you saying my wife could have cheated? I'm not saying that, Grace replied, pretending to hesitate. But sometimes we don't know the whole truth. While Chioma and Uche were busy redoing the DNA test, Grace moved on to her next targets, Bola and Femi, a young couple who had just had twins. They were overjoyed, until Grace got involved. Grace swapped one of the twins with a baby from another family and watched as the chaos began. Why does one baby look nothing like us? Bola asked Femi one night. Don't be silly, Femi replied. They are twins. Sometimes they don't look exactly alike. But the doubt lingered. Bola couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She started taking photos of the babies and comparing them to their birth photos. They've changed, she whispered to herself. This isn't normal. Junior nurse Amoka hadn't forgotten about the strange blood type records. She quietly started digging through the hospital's files, comparing birth records from the past few years. What she found left her stunned. Multiple babies born on the same night had mismatched blood types. Several families reported unexplained health complications in their children. Amoka couldn't believe it. Is this a pattern? Or just a coincidence, she wondered. She decided to keep her findings secret for now, but her suspicion of Grace grew stronger. A week later, Chioma and Uche received the result of the second DNA test. The result was the same, the baby was not theirs. Someone switched our baby. Uche shouted. It wasn't a mistake. Someone did this on purpose. They returned to the hospital, this time with a lawyer. The hospital administration promised to investigate, but behind closed doors, the staff were in chaos. Who could have done this? The head nurse asked. We trust everyone on the team. Grace remained calm. We'll get to the bottom of it, she said, pretending to be concerned. I'll help in any way I can. Word of Chioma and Uche's situation spread like wildfire. Other families began to question their own experiences at St. Mary's Hospital. A mother remembered how her baby had been sick for months without explanation. Another couple realized their baby had a completely different blood type from theirs. One father demanded a DNA test and found out his baby wasn't his. Grace's once perfect world was starting to crack, but she wasn't ready to give up. I've come too far to be caught now, she thought. To cover her tracks, Grace decided to frame someone else. She planted false evidence in the hospital's records, pointing suspicion toward one of the junior nurses, a quiet, timid girl named Ruth. Ruth has been acting strangely lately, Grace told the hospital administrator. Maybe you should check her files. The plan worked, temporarily. Ruth was called in for questioning, and panic spread through the hospital. But Amoka wasn't convinced. Ruth isn't capable of something like this, she said. There's more to this story. The walls were closing in on Grace. For the first time in years, her perfectly crafted scheme was at risk of being exposed. The DNA test chaos had sparked suspicion, and Amoka's quiet investigation was inching closer to the truth. But Grace wasn't about to go down without a fight. "I've survived worse," she told herself. "I just need to think faster than them." Just when Grace thought things couldn't get worse, a young man named Connor walked into the hospital. He was tall, confident, and in his mid-20s. "I need to speak with the head nurse," Connor said, his voice calm but determined. "It's about my birth." The receptionist raised an eyebrow. "What's this about?" Connor leaned in. "I have reason to believe that I was switched at birth in this hospital." "What do you think happened after? Will Grace's evil acts be uncovered?" Stay tuned for part 2. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, share and turn on post notification for part 2.